All right, welcome everybody to Off Day with Ballpark Nation. And yeah, I'm starting the show with Creep by Stone Temple Pilots. The chorus, Half the Man I Used to Be, is a shout out to Orbit, who's getting neutered today. And Andy, I'm making jokes, but you know how it is. You're worried about your dog. He's going under general anesthesia. So you might as well have a little fun with it.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Astros mascot, in which case I think the whole Astros community needs to say a little prayer. But since it's your dog, the Astros community should also say a little prayer.
Let's say the whole thing. Yeah, let's jump into the Astros because you and I, it's kind of fun because we have three baseball teams to talk about today, all three of which had good weekends. We also each saw a movie that we both generally liked, and then there was some news that we're going to actually chat about a little bit. But look, this Astros team is a lot like last year's Astros team, except it's better in the sense that it's starting off better, but it's still out of sync. It still feels disjointed. It still feels like the day the offense shows up, the bullpen blows a game and vice versa. But I'm not going to scoff at taking 2 of 3 from the team that at the time had the best record in baseball.
Yeah, last night was disappointing, but last night has been kind of more of the same of what we've seen from this Astros team so far in 2025. Yordan Alvarez and Christian Walker aren't hitting the baseball. And that ultimately becomes an issue because they're the guys that should be driving this offense. If either of those guys were hitting even 250 and slugging the way you would expect them to, I think you have 5 more wins. So
yeah,
history says that both these guys are going to hit. So I don't love being a game under 500, 21 games into the season. But I also not ready to hit a panic button yet because we're not even out of April. And I think history is on the side of this team performing better offensively than they have. It does lead me to a question that I don't think either of us are going to have the answer to about what exactly Joe Espada and his coaching staff do in Florida with this team, because this is the second year in a row where the offense has come out of spring really, really out of sync, except for Jose Altuve.
let me actually add to that
that's
real
the
quick.
question the staff has.
Before you break it down, this is actually the 3rd spring training in a row that Espada's ran because remember, Dusty famously let Joe run it his last year. It's 3 years in a row that we've come out of this disjointed.
Yeah, so it's curious to me about what is actually happening there. I think the Christian Walker thing is one thing. I think that we've downplayed the idea that he missed most of spring training with a injury. He's now nearly 100 bats into his season, so some of that excuse is starting to wear off. But I think that doesn't help things when a veteran loses the ability to prepare for the season the way he normally would. Alvarez is a bigger mystery to me, and I don't know what the approach should be, other than he's just not seeing the baseball, and he's getting fooled in counts where he wouldn't have been fooled before, and that's the mystery. I do still think by the end of the season, provided he's healthy, he's going to be sitting somewhere between 38 and 45 home runs. He's going to lead the team in RBI. He's going to be doing all the things that we normally expect Yordan Alvarez to do, and it's going to come. He's going to come in really, really hot when it happens. But we've all got blue balls right now waiting for it to happen. That to me is what needs to happen for this Astros team to take the next step and start competing for the lead in the division. Right now, we're kind of playing with the Rangers and Mariners sitting solidly in 3rd place. And I think better things are ahead for this team.
ESPN did a really shitty job on the broadcast last night, except for one of the things they did have was a really cool camera angle where we basically got to watch almost from the catcher umpire's perspective. And on the, Alvarez with the bases loaded, he got the sac fly and everything, but he just missed that ball. It was just a little bit off the barrel, and it would have been a grand slam. He looks like he is just millimeters away from turning it around, but it's been that way since the first game of the season.
Yeah, I think that's the frustrating part for me as just an observer, a fan, is that it feels like in the past when he's gone through his mini dry spells that you can see signs that he's about to turn it around. We've been kind of hung there for most of this month. So I'm hoping it's coming. I'm hoping, almost hitting a grand slam is foretelling good things coming, but we've been almost doing things the entire season. And really outside of Jake Myers and Jose Altuve, the whole team's been almost doing something offensively. And they need to actually start executing and doing things offensively that would be helpful besides striking out and not hitting with runners in scoring position.
I do want to talk a little bit about Christian Walker because I do think two things are at play. Well, I want to talk about two parts of Christian Walker's game right now. One, he's been pretty open about the fact that he's putting a lot of pressure on himself to come onto this team and be the cleanup hitter. And he had he had a really great game on Saturday, and then he had 3 Ks I think last night again. But again, another guy that seems close. But before we bury him the way Astros Twitter wants to bury him, that catch he makes, look, the Padres don't score if he doesn't catch that ball because everybody's talking about that he gets the third and that's it because there's less than 2 outs. The guy wasn't running until the ball hit the ground. But that's a play that Abreu and Singleton don't make last year. And I think people need to recognize that there's another reason why Walker's on this team, and it's not just as bad.
Yeah. The Astros had a need to upgrade at first base, both offensively and defensively. Offensively, still a question mark right now, based mostly on Christian Walker's performance to date. But defensively, he is still a Gold Glove first baseman. And what we got to see the last 2 years with Jose Abreu, who physically was breaking down, and then John Singleton, who was slightly better, but still not going to be mistaken for a high-quality defensive first baseman, as witnessed by the fact that he's not back in the major leagues in any capacity yet. The Astros upgraded. They upgraded defensively. It has won a couple of games for the team this year so far. And I know Astros fans don't want to hear about that because they only want to see home runs from your cleanup hitter, ostensibly. And I get that to some extent, but everyone on the field besides the DH has to play both sides of the ball. And Walker is definitely earning his paycheck on one side of the ball. The other side needs to come through.
What I think is interesting and what's encouraging is, as disjointed as the team is, the record is so much better than last year because I do think it's that they're being more aggressive running and they are playing better defense. And all that tells me is if the offense does what you and I believe the offense is going to do and what it's done historically, this actually still, as we hypothesized at the beginning of the season, is a much better team than last year's team.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. I think some of the mental hurdle the fan base has to get over is how last season started, how it ended, and it looks like on the surface it's more of the same. Although I will absolutely take a 10-11 record over a what were we last year 5-20 by this point. It was bad. They dug themselves a huge hole. Right now they're just playing 500 baseball, and it takes a good week to be 5 games over 500. And this team certainly has the capacity to do that. I don't know that Toronto is necessarily the team that you're going to launch that off on, but I wouldn't have guessed the Astros were going to beat the Padres 2 out of 3 this weekend either, looking at the pitching matchups and how hot the Padres have been. So baseball's a weird sport. The Astros literally could turn it around at any moment and start playing up to what we think their capacity is. And I think anybody writing this team off on April 21st is being a tad bit reactionary.
The Astros won their 10th game on April 30th last year. And again, I know that last year is not this year and whatever. I think also one of the things we talked about is, well, there are 2 realities that I think that are playing out the way most people thought the season would play out this year. The National League is really, really good, and the National League West is really, really good, and the American League is mid, and all that seems to be playing out. And the Astros have had this struggle. If you take away the fact that the Astros played the Giants to start the season, the second game of the series, the second series of the season, and they are right in the hunt with the Dodgers and the Padres. They've played two of the three top teams in the best division in baseball, and are 2-4 against those. But when you look at what they've done against American League opponents, they're actually over 500, and really and truly, outside of an epic bullpen meltdown, should be decidedly over 500.
Well, I mean, one of the series we won was against the Mets, who were also, last time I checked, leading the NL East. So that was not a small feat either to open the season. I mean, you can absolutely trace the hole, if you want to call it a hole, that the Astros are in right now back to that Giants series, because that's the only series they got swept in. It's the only series they didn't win at least a game in. And it's the only series they look kind of not competitive in. Everything else has just been baseball, and things have not necessarily gone the way of the team or the way you would expect. But I also think those things have a way of balancing themselves out over the course of the year. I do think there's a lot of talent on this Astros team. I do know that our fan base, and maybe rightfully so, is butthurt that Kyle Tucker's having an MVP level season and Bregman is having a much better April than he's ever had in his career.
Well, he has
But
slowed
this
down
team would not be
drastically.
appreciably better with. Yeah, but this team would not be appreciably better with either of those guys on the team, because the reasons that they're not scoring runs have more to do with Yordan Alvarez than the absence of Kyle Tucker.
Yeah, completely. And well, it's again, we talked about this last week, where you get a small sample size and then you cling to it for a really, really long time. And I think the other reason why that Giants series affected people is if they get swept by the Giants in June, people were sleeping on how good the Giants were going to be, and the Giants have been good the rest of the other games they played besides playing the Astros. So I will say this, though, one thing that I am starting to see a pattern with that I don't love, and that's Espada kind of borrowing the Dusty Baker playbook of forgetting he has other arms in the bullpen. Taylor Scott had thrown 2 innings on Saturday. Then he goes out there last night and throws an inning, despite the fact that he has some healthy guys out there, including a really fresh arm in Forrest Whitley, who has a different pitch profile than the rest of the guys in the bullpen. And so, look, you're not going to get mad at giving up a solo home run for Fernando Tatis, except that Taylor Scott has not been sharp all year. And so it does seem to me we're seeing the same version of the Dusty Baker bullpen management, where he forgets other guys exist completely.
I don't know if it's forgetting or putting too much trust in one guy over and over and over again. And I know it's old school, and I know the analytics don't agree with me, so just bear with me on this. I do not trust journeyman relievers one season to the next. If you got a great season out of Taylor Scott, and by all measures we did last year, I don't know that I bank on that guy having the same season this year. The Astros tend to do that. Our fan base tends to do that. There's a reason these guys are in the bullpen. There's a reason these guys aren't starters or closers. They're middle reliever guys. They're inconsistent by definition almost. And finding one who's good year over year is nearly impossible. It's why you see so much turnover in a bullpen. And I'm not picking on Taylor Scott. I don't think he's necessarily going to be bad, but I don't think he's necessarily the pitcher he was last year. And we kind of learned this, or at least should have, with Rafael Montero, because we rewarded him for his one good season. Way too much, by the way, and he never could live up to that again. Yeah, I would have loved to see Forrest Whitley get a chance against Tatis, because I think the only way you could get him out is heat he wasn't expecting. But Tatis is playing at a different level right now, too, so I don't know what would have mattered. But you'd like to see other guys get the opportunity. I made a joke on Twitter or Blue Sky or one of those the other day that when we brought up Whitley, we optioned Nick Hernandez to AAA. I had no idea Nick Hernandez was on the roster, because I don't think he's pitched. And I consider myself a fairly diligent observer of what's going on the team. I don't remember him getting an appearance. Maybe he did. Probably did. But the fact that we're carrying this on the roster and we don't use him is kind of what you're talking about with Espada. Yeah, there's guys you trust, and yeah, we've played a lot of close games, but you've got 12 pitchers on a roster, or 13 pitchers on a roster at maximum. You'd like to see them start using those other bullpen pitchers on a more regular basis. I hate to think that we're just carrying a guy to fill out a roster spot, because clearly we could use the help on offense if that's what we're doing.
You mentioned Forrest Woodley showing velo, and Rome had a great article today in The Athletic. I recommend everybody checking it out about how the Astros, for as well as the bullpen has pitched, and has pitched, I mean, one of the best in baseball, it's also got one of the lowest average fastball velocity in the game. It would have been nice to see somebody that actually throws really hard come after Tatis. But like you said, I mean, on Saturday, I think he had a home run. It was one of the most violent home runs I've ever seen. Like, he is playing at a different level. Last thing I want to say about the game, though, was there a part of you when you saw how weird that game started with the collision with Dubon, and then Machado going down with like the non-contact injury that slowed the game down? Did you just feel like all the energy got sucked out of the room and there was zero chance the Astros were going to win that game? Because I did.
The energy, yeah. I think Sunday night games are weird anyway. And it's Easter Sunday, so a lot of fat, happy people sitting in the ballpark that probably ate a lot for lunch. I know I did. I enjoyed my Maggiano's breakfast or brunch yesterday. Way too much pasta. So, mustering up energy, but you have that injury. There's an 11 or 12-minute delay. You don't know sitting in the stands if Araz is dead or concussed or something in between those two things. It looked bad. It looked worse every replay they showed. I understand that he is okay, probably, again, concussed, and will probably miss a few games going through concussion protocol, but otherwise should be all right. But as a fan, you're sitting there, and that sucks all the energy out. Machado, I think, needs a nurse every time that he cuts himself shaving, so I'm not worried about him necessarily. But I worry about those kind of things, especially when Framber Valdez is pitching, because everything distracts that guy. And Valdez didn't pitch poorly. 6 innings, 2 runs. That's not a horrible line. But
And
I don't think
honestly,
anybody watching that game thought
I was going to say, would have been one run if that double play is made, and that was on Dubon. But again, I'm going to give Dubon a pass for making an error in the field 10 minutes after that happened, frankly.
But I don't think anybody watching that game, regardless of what the stat line said at the end, thought Framber pitched well. He was very inconsistent, threw a lot of pitches. And I think that also, you have a team that's not scoring a lot of runs. You have a shaky starting pitcher. You're trailing for most of the game. That's just a recipe for not a lot of energy. And I think the Astros need to have a day, or maybe a few days, where they get off to an early lead and play from ahead for a while. And they haven't done that much this season. And I think the fan base, especially in Daikin Park, need to be able to feed off of that. Because you and I watched it, and I think we're both level-headed as far as watching the Astros and knowing what we're looking at. But they get down 2 runs, and I wonder if there's any point in continuing to watch the game lately. Because they've tied up the last 2 games. They won coming from behind. But yesterday it was kind of like, they went down 2 runs. I just don't know that they have anything going to score 3. And it turns out they did.
Yeah.
So
they didn't. Like you said,
but that's probably more on me and my emotional hole than what our friend Brian Arbor likes to refer to as the emotional hole. It's probably more of my emotional hole than anything else.
Yeah. Well, speaking of digging out of an emotional hole and out of a real one, Texas A&M Aggies had visited the number 1 team in the country in college baseball, number 2 team. They helped the number 1 team in the country out a little bit with increasing the lead in the SEC. But taking 2 of 3 from Arkansas, I'm reading a lot of projections over whether you think they'll make a regional. I think hosting is probably gone. Would you agree? But you have to be feeling a lot better with how A&M's playing right now.
You've got 4 SEC seasons, and if you list out the goals that A&M had at the beginning of the year, they're not going to be a top 8 seed. There's no world that happens. I still think there's a chance to host, but if you go in and win the rest of the SEC series that you have. So there's still 4 series left. The big one obviously is against Texas coming up, but then you've also got Georgia and Missouri and one LSU to deal with. So let's say you won two of 3 of each of those series. Yeah, I think you're hosting. I don't know how likely that is. I think this weekend tells you a lot about what this team is going to be capable of, because Texas by far will be the best team they've played so far this year. I think they're better than Tennessee. I think you can make an argument between Arkansas and Texas. Arkansas had a loaded lineup, and A&M handled their bats, held them to 2 runs twice, which nobody's held Arkansas to under 6 runs all season. So there's a lot going right for A&M right now, but they dug themselves such a huge hole. At this point, I think what you can hope for best is to be the hottest 2 or 3 seed going into a regional. But there's still a lot to play for A&M for this season, and because I think the postseason is now a realistic thing for them to be not counting on, but certainly aiming for.
On the other side of the Brazos, I guess, down the road a little bit, Texas is sitting number 1. They'll stay number 1 this weekend. I was a little concerned because there had been a couple of minor injuries to Texas, and the offense had looked sluggish. The offense broke out in a big way against the number 8 team in the country, including ruling them yesterday. One of the things that you know me well enough to know I'm not a big victory lap guy or any of that stuff. Particularly with baseball, I expect the bottom to fall out at any moment. Thanks, lifelong Astros fan. But I do wish that I think we can now, if you look at Texas's first season athletically in the SEC, where I believe they've won 8 SEC titles in various sports, we can quit the narrative that we're not ready for the SEC. Can we at least have the fan bases stop that at this point, do you think?
Can we still say it about Oklahoma?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, then I'm fine. I could be half right. No, I think if you have to give flowers to where you need to give flowers to, Texas's AD did a very good job of preparing their rosters, hiring the right coaches, recruiting the right guys, funding NIL the way it needed to be funded for the sports they care about, to be competitive on day 1 in the SEC. And I think that surprised a lot of people. I don't know how much it surprised people in Texas, although, I'm sure there was a lot of noise being talked. I know there was a lot of noise being talked about Texas not being ready. But if you look at the history of the University of Texas, and again, pains me to say, it's very rare in the 150, 160, 170-year history of that school and the 100-plus years in collegiate sports that they weren't prepared for something. So it's should Texas, with all its resources, have won more football national championships in history? Probably. Hadn't worked out that way. But they were going to be a player from day 1 in whatever league they were in. And it's because they looked at it 3 years ago, decided to make a good football hire. Basketball hasn't worked out as well. Hired one of the best baseball coaches in baseball working right now. And guess what? You're competitive in both those things. Same thing with softball. Softball is going to be really interesting because I know you preemptively claimed number 1 last week, and it didn't quite work out that way for you because there was another team just down the road that got number 1, and I think held this week. But no, I think the narrative that Texas wasn't going to be ready for the SEC was overplayed. But you can apply all those arguments to Oklahoma again, so I'm okay with it.
And you know me,
What
I'm
happened?
okay with that. I'm okay with that too. I want to talk a little movies, because I do want to talk transfer portal stuff because both Texas and A&M.
Well, before we go, we have to.
Fair enough.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but before we move on to movies, what's your outlook on this weekend? It's 3 games in Dish Falk, and there will be a coach that's highly motivated, and there will be a alternate team that's highly motivated to show that coach that he did the wrong thing. So whose emotion wins out? How does that work for you?
Um, I'm not a big believer in emotion in baseball. I think the more you try at baseball, the more you fail. I think Texas will take 2 of 3. I don't think it's a sweep. I'm actually not sure any of the games will be particularly close, though. I do think I've got some concerns with the Longhorn bullpen and how exposed it is, but I think you're going to have a close series, and I think close series as far as it's not going to be a sweep either way. And I do think because it's at Dish Falk, there's an edge given to Longhorns, but that's probably it. I think if this was played in College Station, A&M wins 2 of 3. I think the biggest emotion, if there is an emotional thing, though, I don't know if it has anything to do with Schloss one way or the other. I think it's what you said. A&M's getting off the deck, but they still have to win every single series left to get where they want to get. I think that's a bigger factor for those guys than because that success is proving Schloss wrong as far as leaving. So I'm sure there's a fire in the belly about it, but I think that they want to make sure they get off the deck and get to the postseason because that's where real statements are made.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know how the series is going to play out because if you look at the numbers, if there's an advantage for A&M, it's that Texas as a team doesn't hit left-handed pitching as well as they hit right-handed pitching. I think they have like a 245 average. We're going to throw out 3 left-handed starters. So that's what we've done all season. If Texas has a lead going into the 8th and 9th, I think your bullpen is superior. And I think you've got a shutdown guy whose name I can't remember right now that will be able to save those games and hold that lead. And I think that's what Schloss has done more than anything is be able to continue to hold on to wins that last year's team might have coughed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As well as getting a lot more out of that offense than I think a lot of people expected. On the other hand, A&M is hitting really, really well right now, kind of up and down the lineup. So we'll see if the addition of Caden Sorrell continues to be a bulwark for the Aggies offense. But it should be a good series. It will be hotly contested. And I will say, if you are on the fence about watching college baseball and don't think there's enough passion in it or think it's kind of weird, this will be a good weekend series to tune into, regardless of who your rooting interest is for, because it's baseball.
Yeah, I really wish I could actually go. I'm going to be out in El Paso covering the Chihuahuas, but it definitely would be a good time to be at Dish Falk. And I love that. I guess people are mad that we brought the pep band to the series this past weekend. I thought it was kind of fun. I mean, but that's me.
Sure. Movies.
So, yeah, movies. So we both, I guess, got a little discouraged by the Astros independently, I must say, and watched the movie Companion. I was honestly really impressed with it. There's a couple of minor quibbles. One, I thought it was kind of I did think it was kind of weird that the lead robot chick had messed up teeth because if you're going to manufacture something, you should be you would think perfect. But I thought it was a really, really cool dark comedy twist on the whole robot thing. Came out of nowhere for me, but I've actually had a pretty good run of picking random movies this weekend, and that was another good choice we made.
I think if we were in a normal movie, historically normal movie time, Companion would have got more run in the theaters than it did. I just don't think people are going to the movies the way they used to. And we could talk for hours about the reasons for that. But I kind of see this as being one of those movies that gets a lot of word of mouth now that it's on a streaming platform, that will become something a lot more people have exposure to. I think Dennis Quaid's kid did a fantastic job as in the role that he was in, playing both sides of that role. And if you watch the film, you'll know what I'm talking about there. Sophie Turner as Iris was outstanding. And to your point, I really like the way they kind of turned, or at least addressed, the whole Isaac Asimov rules of robotics on its ear pretty quickly. and dealt with all those things because I know there were nerds in the audience going, but robots can't harm people. It's part of their prime direct. Shut up.
Yeah.
Go watch Star Trek or whatever, because in this world, those robots could kill you. Um,
That's right.
but I thought it was really well done. It is hard for me to watch movies at home to keep my interest because there are streaming opportunities and other screens and all that other stuff. And this was a movie that I could actually sit down, put my phone away, and watch it and enjoy it, which means to me there were no dead spots that made my brain go looking somewhere else. So I really thought, good flick. People should go see it.
Yeah, 100%.
Or
Highly
stay home and
recommend
see
it.
it since it's on Max.
Yeah, I mean, again, highly recommend it. The other movie I checked out that I had not seen because I frankly thought the trailer looked dumb, and then the sequels trailer came out, and the sequel trailer looked good, so I wanted to watch The Accountant. And honestly, man, I actually really, really liked the movie and found it, particularly some of the end reveals, strangely heartfelt. To the point that it's not. I'm not often going to be moved emotionally at a Ben Affleck action movie unless that emotion is revulsion as he plays Batman. So I was pretty impressed with everything about that movie, including the reveal of who his assistant was, all that stuff.
Why did you say that name? Yeah, I haven't seen The Accountant in probably 15 years, but it is one. I'm not a big Ben Affleck fan. Outside of Phantoms and Mallrats, but I think it's
You're
a
the bomb in
quality
Phantoms.
action film. It's a quality action film. And I think that the sequel, the sequel looks really, really interesting to me because I saw that preview prior to sitting down for Sinners this weekend. So I am looking forward to seeing that, and probably will make a trip to the theater for it. It's like John Barenthal and Ben Affleck shooting a bunch of things deserves a big screen treatment.
What was your take on Sinners, real quick? Because I'm going to be going next week.
Sinners is fantastic, and I had to sit with it a little bit because there's a lot going on. But I think some of the things I've read, some of the things I've seen about the film, kind of sum it up. It is all at once a Southern Gothic movie, a vampire movie, a Chicago mobster movie, and all those things intertwine to bring together a really fun 2 hours worth of film. Um, it's well done. The vampire stuff is, for vampire movies, it's not over the top,
Mhm.
but it almost makes you understand why people might want to be a vampire, the way they're explaining some of this stuff, and it makes you absolutely makes you understand why people would resist it as well, the way other people explained it. Um, Michael B. Jordan is outstanding. This is not the kind of film that normally would get Oscar treatment, and I don't necessarily think it will. But if you told me that he would get a nomination for playing either of the characters he played, I would believe it because he's really, really solid, really, really good. And Ryan Coogler is just a masterful director. And those two, when they work together, if you like Creed, if you like Black Panther, you're going to like this movie.
I'm intrigued to watch it because everything I've read is that this feels like the first Ryan Coogler, like the movie he's been building to, because Creed was a previous property, Black Panther was a previous property, Fruitville Station, which brought him onto the scene, was also a previous property. But this feels like this is his step into becoming a full-on auteur, and so I'm very excited to see it.
Yeah, and it's I will say this, that there's enough going on. There are two post-credit scenes. One's immediate, like 30 seconds after what you think the end of the movie is. You need to watch that. The other one is less important. It's at the very end of the credits. Um, but there's enough going on between the movie and that first post-credit scene that there could be an entire world that Coogler is building towards should he want to.
Mm.
And I think there's enough depth in there and enough opportunity for Michael B. Jordan to continue to participate if he wanted to. I will also say that Haley Steinfeld is outstanding. I think it's the first time she's been allowed to be an adult, and she
Yeah.
looks really, really adult. So
she's kind of been on the scene since the remake of Rooster Cogburn, True Grit, and you're right. It's finally it'd be interesting to see her grow up. I want to transition real quick. You and I, what you and I have a lot of interests, and I think we are more educated than most in a lot of fields. And I think one of the things is that you and I are also smart enough to know when we're not necessarily educated in something. The Holy Father just passed.
Yep.
You and I are both Catholics, but I think also I at least loved the direction he was taking the church. But my biggest concern right now is, like, I'm not your Donald Trump fan. I'm not saying I can't be won over by Donald Trump, but I'm not your Donald Trump fan. But enough is enough. Pete Hegseth has to go. You have one major job when you're commander in chief, and that is making sure that the men and women charged with this country's defense are safe. Not only do we have the snafu with the reporter, but now apparently he's just sending messages to family members to feel like a big shot. Andy, you have the darkest timeline listed on your profile right now. That definitely doesn't help feeling like we're in the darkest timeline. The news of Hegseth in the Signal chat.
I am not a person who's necessarily going to pick on you because you have a weakness, and addiction to whatever substance or activity is absolutely a weakness that is classified as a disease by some people. I get that, but our president chose to put a admitted alcoholic, TV host who has no more qualifications than you do to be the Secretary of Defense, and has given him free reign over realistically the thing we do best, the biggest budget item on our line item on our budget, and the thing that is most important to preserving the freedoms that we all want to pretend that we take advantage of every day. Some of us do it better than others. That's where the pretend came from. Hegseth is incompetent. Hegseth is a borderline criminal. And his blatant disregard for the safety and security of our servicemen in the field is sickening. And anybody who thinks that's political can go get bent, because it has nothing to do with politics and everything to do with people who have volunteered to protect you that you are leaving out in the wind for your own ego.
This stuff matters, and there's been little things with Trump's presidency dating back to the first one, and it's the comments, it's the trusting Russian officials over our own intelligence. But this is something that bipartisan people warned about, and if only more Republican senators had a backbone, we wouldn't be dealing with this problem. But it's a problem that's got to be dealt with now, because Trump was right about one thing, and the world is less safe than it was during his first presidency. And we cannot go into, and as you brought up before we had our show started, that we were also seeing a bunch of people quitting and talking about that it's like utter chaos in the Department of Defense right now. And I was just telling my mother-in-law that I'm not terribly worried about Hegseth's impact, because the military has enough redundancies to save us from doing anything stupid. But maybe I was in fact incorrect with that statement.
I mean, I understand where your faith is placed and why your faith is placed there. I'm concerned that there's just no accountability at the top, and eventually that filters down into an organization. How long it takes is maybe the only thing that saves us.
Yeah, well, between that, hopefully the right thing happens, and Trump realizes he bet on the wrong horse, and we get somebody that's actually competent in there. But I'm not hopeful that's going to happen.
No, there's blatant disregard for the security measures that we've established as a country, and that's the most concerning thing for me as just a regular average Joe civilian. So even if Hegseth stays, I'd like there's to be some recognition that what they're doing is wrong and they need to be doing it the right way.
Here's hoping. So I guess as we get ready to get out of here, it's a good time. We'll end with our highlights from both the Astros, Aggies, and Longhorns. Andy, any final thoughts from you?
Hey, let's take 2 or 3 from Toronto and have a good week, Astros fans.
Now it's up to Christian Walker, 0 for 2 tonight. Strikeout and a foul out.
It'll be a heck of a time for Christian Walker to find one and put a charge into it.
There you go, line drive to left, and we're tied at 2.
Ask and you shall receive.
Line drive bullet to the Crawford boxes, ties it up against King here in the 6th.
Finally get a mistake from Michael King, and Christian Walker hammers it on a line to tie it up.
That is going to be the last batter for Michael King.
Ripped, left center field. Let's go home. So far, a season for the ages for Texas. Ends with their 4th sweep of an SEC opponent. Kimball Schuessler, a career high 8 runs batted in. 14-2, Texas run rules Auburn.
Ripped left field, going back, and Laviolette as insurance. Dude can mash. It had been pretty quiet for Jace Laviolette. 0 for 3 with a walk. Ripped left field, going back, and Laviolette as insurance. Dude can mash. It had been pretty quiet for Jace Laviolette. 0 for 3 with a walk.